A U.S. Special Forces soldier who took part in the arrest of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is accused of making big money from that U.S. raid.
On the night of January 2nd, 2026, a US Special Forces soldier was sitting in a military facility hours away from one of the most dangerous operations of his career. In a few hours, he and his unit would fly into Caracas, Venezuela, to capture a sitting president. He knew the exact target, and he knew things that maybe a few hundred people on the planet knew. So what did he do with that information? He opened his phone, logged into a betting app, and put $33,000 on it actually happening. By the time the sun came up on January 3rd, the president of Venezuela was in handcuffs, and this soldier had turned $33,000 into over $400,000, all because he bet on a mission he was about to carry out himself. His name is Gannon Van Dyke, and this might be the dumbest crime a smart person has ever committed. Van Dyke wasn't some random low-ranking soldier who stumbled into classified information. This guy was the real deal. He joined the US Army in 2008, spent 17 years working his way out through the ranks. By 2023, he'd been promoted to Master Sergeant, which is the second highest enlisted rank you can reach. He was assigned to the US Army Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Fort Bragg is where the elite operate. It's home to Joint Special Operations Command, the unit that plans and carries out the most sensitive military operations the country runs. This is a man who had spent nearly 2 decades being trusted with secrets. He signed non-disclosure agreements, sat in classified briefings. He was trained over and over again to understand that the information he had access to could get people killed if it was leaked. On December 8, 2025, Van Dyke was brought into the planning for something called Operation Absolute Resolve. The mission? Capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. This wasn't a theoretical exercise. This was happening, and Van Dyke was part of it. He knew when it was going to happen, the target, and he had access to the operational details. And about 2 weeks later, he had an idea. On December 26, 2025, Van Dyke transferred $35,000 from his personal bank account into a cryptocurrency exchange. The same day, he created an account on Polymarket. Now, if you don't know what Polymarket is, it's basically a betting platform for real-world events. You can bet on practically anything. Will a certain politician win an election? Will a ceasefire happen by a certain date? Or will the US forces invade a country? You buy yes or no shares, and if you're right, you get paid. It had exploded in popularity in 2025, billions of dollars in daily trading volume, and crucially for this story, it was largely unregulated. There were no rules in place specifically designed to stop someone from betting on an event they had inside knowledge about. At least, that's probably what Van Dyke was thinking. Between December 27th and January 2nd, he placed 13 bets. Every single one took the yes position. US forces in Venezuela by January 31st. Yes. Maduro out by January 31st. Yes. Will the US invade Venezuela by January 31st? Again, it was a yes. Trump invokes war powers against Venezuela by January 31, and that was also a yes. His biggest bet was on the Maduro one. He put $32,000 on Maduro out by January 31st. That single bet would return a 1,242% profit. The vast majority of his bets were placed on the night of January 2nd, hours before the operation began. Think about that. This man is sitting there knowing that in a matter of hours he's going to be on a military operation to capture one of the most wanted people in the Western Hemisphere, and he's on his phone placing bets. That's crazy. In the early hours of January 3rd, US forces moved into Caracas. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were captured at a residence, and hours later, President Trump posted a photo on Truth Social of Maduro in handcuffs, wearing a grey sweatsuit, protective headphones, and a blindfold. Operation Absolute Resolve was a success, and on the same day, Polymarket resolved several Maduro and Venezuela-related contracts to yes. Van Dyke's account lit up. His $33,000 in bets had become over $409,000. There's even a photo taken after the raid of Van Dyke standing on a deck wearing military fatigues and holding a rifle, standing alongside 3 other soldiers. The man who had just bet on his own mission posing for a victory photo. Now here's where it goes from bold to incredibly stupid. Within hours of the operation being announced, Van Dyke withdrew the majority of his winnings from Polymarket. He moved the money into a foreign cryptocurrency vault. Then he transferred it into a brand new brokerage account he'd just set up. He was trying to get the money as far away from Polymarket as possible and as fast as possible. But there was a problem he hadn't thought about. People actually noticed. Almost immediately after Trump announced the Maduro capture, journalists and market analysts started flagging suspicious trading on Polymarket. Someone had made a series of very specific, very well-timed bets on Maduro-related contracts. The amounts were unusual, and the timing was quite suspicious. Articles started appearing. Social media started buzzing. Who made $400,000 betting on the Maduro raid? Van Dyke panicked, and on January 6th, 3 days after the operation, he messaged Polymarket and asked them to delete his account. His excuse? He'd lost access to his email address, connected to it. That was a lie. The same day, he changed the email on his cryptocurrency exchange account to a new address that wasn't registered in his name, an email he'd actually created weeks earlier, on December 14th, before the operation even happened. So not only did he place the bets, or he tried to cash out immediately, he had set up a fake email in advance, suggesting he'd planned the cover-up before the mission even started. And here's the thing that got him caught. Polymarket cooperated. When they spotted the suspicious trading, they flagged it to the Department of Justice, handed over everything, including the account details, transaction records, IP data, everything. As Polymarket put it in their statement, when we identified a user trading on classified government information, we referred the matter to the DOJ and cooperated with their investigation. Insider trading has no place on Polymarket. The betting app he used to commit the crime is the same one that helped catch him. On April 23, 2026, the Department of Justice unsealed the indictment. Van Dyke was arrested and charged with 5 federal offenses: unlawful use of confidential government information for personal gain, theft of non-public government information, commodities fraud, wire fraud, and making an unlawful monetary transaction. Some of those charges carry up to 20 years in prison. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which regulates prediction markets, filed a separate civil complaint on the same day, and their chairman, Michael Selig, didn't hold back. He said Van Dyke took action that endangered US national security and put the lives of American service members in harm's way. Because that's the bit people actually forget. This wasn't just insider trading. By placing bets that were publicly visible on a prediction market, Van Dyke was effectively signaling that something was about to happen in Venezuela. If the wrong people had noticed those bets before the actual operation, it could have compromised the entire mission, and soldiers could have died. US Attorney Jay Clayton called it a clear insider trading and said prediction markets are not a haven for using misappropriated, confidential, or classified information for personal gain. Van Dyke appeared in federal court in North Carolina on April 25th and was released on a $250,000 bond. His case has been assigned to the Southern District of New York. When reporters asked President Trump about this in the Oval Office, he said he didn't know the details but offered this: "That's like Pete Rose betting on his own team." Then he paused and added, "The whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino."
The whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino.
And this is where the story gets genuinely scary, because Van Dyke isn't the only one. Just weeks before his arrest, the Associated Press reported that a group of brand new Polymarket accounts had made extremely specific, well-timed bets on a US-Iran ceasefire on April 7th. Those accounts made hundreds of thousands of dollars, and nobody knows who was behind them. Another anonymous trader made roughly $550,000 betting on the removal of Iran's Ayatollah. Again, perfectly timed. And again, nobody was caught. And it's not just geopolitics. Kalshi, another prediction market, recently fined and suspended 3 congressional candidates who had bet on the results of their own elections. Sitting politicians betting on themselves winning. The problem is simple. Prediction markets like Polymarket and Kalshi have grown faster than anyone expected. Billions in daily volume, millions of users. You can bet on wars, elections, interest rate decisions, practically anything. But the regulations haven't kept up. The rules that exist for stock market insider trading don't nearly apply to a prediction market when someone's betting on whether a country gets invaded. Until the Van Dyke case, nobody had ever been prosecuted for insider trading on a prediction market. This is actually the first time. The CFTC had never filed a case like this before. The legal framework is being written in real time. And here's the uncomfortable question nobody's answered yet. Van Dyke got caught because his bets were big, obvious, and timed right before a massive public event. But what about the bets that aren't obvious? What about the government analyst who puts $500 on a trade deal they knew is coming? What about the congressional staffer who bets on a policy announcement they helped draft? And what about the military officer who bets small enough that nobody notices? The truth is, prediction markets have created an entirely new kind of insider trading. And right now, the only thing stopping it is the hope that people with classified information won't be tempted by a betting app on their phone. Based on what just happened, that's not a great bet. There's one final detail about this story that I just can't get out of my head. Van Dyke spent 17 years in the military. He made it to the second highest enlisted rank. He was trusted with some of the most sensitive operations his country runs. He was literally on the team that captured a foreign president. His base salary as a master surgeon was somewhere around $60,000 to $80,000 a year. He threw all of that away for $409,000. After taxes and legal fees, probably less. A sum of money that sounds impressive until you realize he's now facing decades in prison, a destroyed career, a dishonorable discharge, and his name permanently attached to the first ever prediction market insider trading case. He could have retired with honor, with a full pension, benefits for life, and the respect of having served nearly 2 decades in special forces. But instead, he opened a betting app. Van Dyke is currently out on bond, awaiting trial in New York. If convicted on all charges, he faces up to 20 years in federal prison. The $409,000 is almost certainly gone, the career is definitely gone, and the prediction market industry is watching this case closer than any other, because whatever happens next will set the rules for everyone. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.